Welcome back to the Eric Krown Crypto channel, wishing you a happy daily start to this first day of May. It's the first day of May, and there's actually plenty to discuss today on the short-term timeframes. So for the last few days, we've only spoken about the higher-term timeframes. Obviously, that is, well and far away, but more importantly, today's setups are all going to be on the short-term timeframes, more or less relevant for this, the first portion of this week, maybe even later into the end of this week as well. Anyways, other than that, I want to once again give the spotlight to the buyback promotion going on. They got 0% on maker fees for derivative contract orders, and you can even get the Jewel for free for the first 30 days if you follow the directions in the link in the description below. And because Bybit will be going KYC relatively soon, I believe on the 8th, I believe it's the 8th at least, a lot of people expressed concern with that, and they actually do have a decentralized exchange arm called Apex, which you can find an affiliate link in the description below as well. It'll actually award you 5% off of your fees for the lifetime of the account. Anyways, sweet. That's enough shilling for today. Let's just jump right on into it. First and foremost, I wanted to follow up on the 4-hour setup that we identified. I believe it was Thursday or Friday of last week. This one took a little bit of time to play out, but it was actually having a downside setup in this case, with a higher probability of about, I think it was, I forget the exact move right there. But ultimately, this one is actually played out in the way that this setup was defined. Essentially, getting that last move to the downside, as you can see. But that does not mean that the downside is actually over as of right now. While it did have a higher probability to play out to the downside, in this case, about 66% hit rate over about 101 closed trades over the past few years. This one, I do think probably plays a little bit lower after Bitcoin does get rejected, essentially from 30,000 bucks yet again. Anyways, the reason why I do say that there is likely more downside to go is because in this case, we can see that while the 4-hour time frame is closing below the blue range lows right here, this is coming alongside increasing volatility. So BBWP is expanding right here, volatility is expanding. So I would be looking for this one more likely to play to somewhere around the bottom side of the next range lows, the 80% of historic returns range lows right here, which is in the upper $27,000 territory. I do think that that is a potential area of interest right there. Anyways, moving on, and also to the point as to why there's potentially more downside. Daily on CME does have some regular bearish divergence, phantom drives over here, but bearish divergence nonetheless, coming off of the rejection of what would be the bullish control zone right here. Now, these are not usually like really concerning signals, but I do think that it likely provides the impetus for a bit more of a pullback, maybe some more back down around last week's lows. This was, again, maybe upper $27,000 territory. As that does play out. Anyways, 4-hour time frame is also going to be showing on the Jewel Light. It's a continuation signal right here, supported by DMI as well, as that turns red in the background. Just another thing that does suggest, short-term downside, a little bit more likely. Now, we're going to go over the very short term soon enough here, because it's a little bit different, probably, or at least a potential for a very short-term bounce. But ultimately, I would be looking for these to play out, throughout the next couple of, throughout the next 2, maybe 3 days, something like that. Anyways, moving on into stochastic momentum. If we start off over here on the hourly time frame, we can see that it is heavy down as long as Bitcoin is closing below 29,250 on CME. So far, so good for that one. 4-hour time frame also going to be heavy down as long as Bitcoin's below 29,800. 6-hour time frame is also going to be heavy down as long as Bitcoin's below 29,750. 12-hour time frame is going to actually have a fresh turn to the downside if Bitcoin closed below 28,350, which actually right now it's above, but you can see that it's becoming a little bit more of a concern right there. And then the daily will actually be remaining with upside momentum as long as Bitcoin's above 27,300. So the higher term time frames in relation to the lower term time frames, still do maintain an overall upside posturing, even if Bitcoin comes down to like low $27,000 territory. But the low and medium term time frames do suggest that short term continuation to the downside more likely here than not. Coming off of this last move. Anyways, now let's speak about areas of interest. I think we briefly went over here on the 4-hour time frame. Again, as long as volatility is increasing, downside is more likely in this case from this particular setup. If we go to the daily as well, you'll also notice that the bottom side of the blue 50% of historic returns range lows is coming in basically around last week's lows as well. I don't necessarily think that things need to get exactly down to there, and you can see that it's trying to bounce off the median right there. But ultimately, anywhere down around there is fair game. I would still say the same thing as before, however, that as long as Bitcoin is above about 26,600 on a daily closing basis, this consolidation over here likely does lead to new highs on this rally based off of the long-term analysis, but that's not the focus of today, obviously. But shorter, medium-term timeframes, they can easily play down, I would say significantly more and still maintain that posturing. But 26.6, the big area. Below 26.6, you're going to start to hear me turn pretty bearish, at least for a move down to like maybe a little bit below 25,000 bucks. Personally speaking, I do think that things could come down significantly more than that. Anyways, other than that, we should also be aware that the daily 55 on spot price action is coming in, yes, around these same levels as well, which is, kind of like your mid, maybe upper $27,000 territory. So what does it look like eventually? Maybe something like this, maybe a bounce in between, spends this time and then tries another move to the upside, something like that. There's one thing very, 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 very clear from this last piece of price action for the past 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 days now. The second that Bitcoin, maybe not the second, but if and when Bitcoin does trade back above these highs that we saw over this past week, basically 30,000 bucks, especially on a daily closing basis, we can expect big moves to the upside, or at least I would expect big moves to the upside, namely somewhere very, very likely above 32,000 bucks, probably finding its way somewhere between 33 to 34,000 bucks. But again, short term, is more likely to trade to the downside here. Now, I should say that, or I alluded to earlier, a potential setup. I think it was on the hourly here. This one could be developing for a bit of a short-term bounce relatively soon, but it's not there just yet. The reason why I say that it's relevant to be aware of is because we can very clearly see that there are many closures now below the blue 50% of historical returns range lows right here, which then obviously initiates a secondary condition. Very, very important condition, I might add, but it is secondary condition to the first one, and that is a decline in the moving average of volatility. So as you can see, it is still expanding right here, but as it gets higher and higher, it will inevitably be more likely, statistically speaking, to pop back down and start to go into a contraction phase. If that happens while it's still trading within this region right here, very likely we're going to see a short-term bounce first. Short-term bounce, just going off of memory, from an hourly setup, usually somewhere around like 2%. So, from this area right here to 2% would put Bitcoin like maybe just under 29,000 bucks or so. So if you do see that, then I would be looking for a short-term bounce. I'd be looking for a short-term bounce. It's not really much to say on top of that sentence. But again, that needs to happen first before that becomes, more likely, obviously. But until then, downside on the medium-term timeframes, a lot more likely right here. And if we get that signal, if we get that set up on the hourly, then 29, somewhere maybe just shy of 29,000 first, and then down. It wouldn't really change anything. I'm basically looking for the short and medium-term timeframes to ultimately play a little bit further to the south side, as long as Bitcoin's below, let's call it 29,000 bucks on a 4-hour closing basis. Just downside's more likely right here. Anyways, and then also the 4-hour will, potentially lead into a setup as well. But again, this one's like still expanding. So, would suggest that more likely to trade somewhere down around here first before anything else, and then you might get that setup, which I think on average is somewhere between like a 4 to 6% move. Just going off of memory right here, which would be a pretty nice bounce-ola. But ultimately, what essentially am I looking for? Basically something like this. Bitcoin trades, sideways and down here on the short term, and then likely sets it up, if it is going to be bullish, for a run, maybe after the first week of May, maybe around week number 2, 3, something like that. Would kind of make sense if it is going to be happening, with full-on confirmation for Boo Law fucking enjoyments, the bulldozer getting started back above about 30,000 bucks. Anyways, I actually think that's good enough for today's video. Not very long, kind of on the short and sweet side. It's actually a holiday here in Finland. If you didn't know, it's Vappu, whatever the fuck. Hyvää Vappua. That's what they say all the time. I don't know what it means. I don't speak any Finnish despite living here for like 5 years. So all good. But yeah, we do need to get on our horses relatively soon. So I think I'll leave that particular video, I'll leave this video right there. I think, yeah, that's where I want to leave it. With that said, I want to be wishing you the best as always. Take care, much love, and Hyvää Vappua.